Welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing a comparison on the R5 and the R6 Mark II. We're going to be going over the build, specs, and the real life differences between these two cameras. This comparison is going to be quite subjective depending on your use case. We will be using a checkmark system to see which camera performs better in each category, but this will be very dependent on what you're shooting. For this review, we're going to be using the Canon RF 16mm and 50mm lenses. So jumping straight into the build, the R5 has a top LCD screen, which is super helpful for landscape photographers and astrophotographers because it's going to let you look at your settings without having to look at the bright LCD screen on the back of the camera. And the R5 has this feature, while the R6 Mark II does not have this feature. Another build difference between the two models is the photo-video switch on top of the R6 Mark II. This is especially helpful for hybrid shooters who shoot back and forth between photo and video a lot during their shoots. It means you don't have to change things like shutter speed or log profile when you're switching back and forth. Moving on to the sensor itself, they both share 8 stops of stabilization when paired with certain lenses. This means there aren't really any differentiating factors when it comes to using telephoto lenses or shooting video. The R5 features one CF Express card slot and one UHS-2 SD card slot. The R6 Mark II features 2 UHS-2 SD card slots. The CF Express card in the R5 means you can handle a lot more data a lot faster than the R6. One complaint though is because you're using 2 different cards, it can be more expensive and also bottleneck you by how fast your second card is. In comparison, the R6 Mark II uses 2 of the same SD cards. The R5 has a 5.6 million dot EVF compared to the R6 Mark II, which has a 3.6 million dot EVF. This higher resolution means it's going to be easier on your eye and a way better user experience, especially on those long shoots. When it comes to battery, they both share the LPE6 battery. However, the R6 comes out on top with a battery life of 580 shots, whereas the R5 caps out at 490. In terms of resolution, we've got the R5 sitting at 45 megapixels, with the R6 sitting at 24 megapixels. This means that with the R5, you're going to have a lot more room for cropping, which is super helpful if you're a wildlife or sports photographer, or anyone that is needing to have more control over where they frame their shot in post, because they might not have that control during shooting. Because of the resolution difference, the R6 Mark II has a lower pixel density, and in the real world, this means it is actually going to perform better in low light. The R6 Mark II has a high ISO of 102,400, whereas the R5 has a high ISO of 51,200. While this isn't a massive deal, I did notice a bit of a difference when shooting indoors. When it comes to autofocus, the performance between the two is very similar, and I don't think you would be disappointed with the autofocus on either of these models. The electronic shutter, the R5 can shoot 20 FPS, whereas the R6 can shoot 40 FPS. The R5 is still super fast, but because of that high resolution sensor, you are going to have a degree of rolling shutter. 40. When it comes to video, the R6 Mark II might seem like the obvious choice right out of the box because it's marketed more as a hybrid camera with the video photo switch here. However, when we look at it, the R5 actually has more codecs and a higher frame rate. When it comes to codecs, the R5 lets you shoot in DCI 4K, whereas the R6 Mark II doesn't. The The R5 shoots at 4K 120p compared to the R6 Mark II, which shoots at 60p 4K with no crop. When it comes to video resolution, the R5 wins again as it can shoot up to 8K internal RAW. Comparatively, the R6 Mark II can shoot 6K RAW to an external recorder. Both of these cameras have a lot to offer in terms of video. The R6 is going to be your choice for hybrid shooting, whereas the R5 could be used in a production workflow. Speaking of production, both of these models have a micro HDMI port, which is a massive downside as these cords break super easily. I hope this has been informative. I've seen a lot of people tossing up between these two cameras, and while this isn't meant to be a definitive answer of which is better, it is meant to show you the strong suits of each camera and hopefully let you decide which is going to be better for your preferences. As always, guys, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.